Welcome everyone. Today is Wednesday, April 17th, and we don't have any demos. If you're new to the meeting, welcome to the CNAB community meeting. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Okay, our first discussion topic is inner bundle dependencies. I don't see Ryan. I think he authored that one. Or Rishi, did you want to chat about it?
Yeah, he's just running like a few minutes late from another meeting. But essentially, yeah, we started this discussion about how to specify, when you have a dependent bundle, like an example he provides is like I have some running application, it's a bundle, and then I have a database bundle, and I want to specify specific constraints about what type of database can this bundle depend on. So like a Postgres with a certain version, and it gets kind of unwieldy to a certain point because you have to add so many different parameters. So we kind of post a question out there of like, what are people thinking about this? And I think Caroline chimed in, which was awesome. And we just wanted to see where people are landing on this issue. I think last I checked in on this, Caroline, you were potentially going to create a PR for this. We'd be happy to work with you on this or help out if you'd like that.
Yeah. Sorry, I said next week and then just realized like 2 minutes ago that meant now this week.
No worries.
So probably be like today, tomorrow, I'll draft something and then send it up there. I'd really like to have something for dependencies, maybe not like a specific tool, but something that is in the spec that multiple tools could rely on to resolve, like you were saying, I need a generic type of technology like Postgres, and I don't care if it came from this cloud provider's hosted service or that one's. I just need Postgres or something like that. That would be really interesting to me.
Yeah, exactly. Like you can see this model with databases and like a bunch of other like generic technology dependencies. So yeah, cool. So I think that was it. Just yeah, once the PR is there, we can like have more discussions about it and talk about it. But yeah.
Carolyn, were you thinking about maybe having like a requires section in the bundle.json? In Urvashi, if you had any thoughts around how y'all would want to do that. I did see the parameter proposal or putting stuff in the parameters, but Caroline and I proposed a more robust issue here, solution here. Carolyn, does that mean, okay, you posted something.
Yeah. So we kind of dealt with this problem in the OSB API and service catalog with Kubernetes. So I was going to try to look at some of the solutions that we spent months on and see if those would be interesting at all to people here as well. We were looking at something provides requires. A bundle could say, I can provide Postgres 10.1.1 or some range or something like that. Yeah, I'm totally stealing Kent stuff, actually. And then another bundle can say, I need Postgres some range or something like that. And it could be different. Like I'm heavily relying on database because, to be honest, that is like the 80% case for what a lot of people are trying to do. But it could be something different than that. And then the idea is that you'd be able to kind of match this up. So instead of just saying like, I need a specific version of a specific bundle, you could just kind of match up arbitrary key values and different labels and types of filters, essentially. And if they all match up, then you're like, cool, I've got a bundle that could meet this requirement. And there's lots of other things you got to think about, like how do you actually find a list that you should be evaluating against and other things like that.
The provides piece is really interesting. I've seen like requirements, like in Helm charts, especially in B3, you have like a requirements section for dependencies, but the provides thing is a little bit new for me. So I'll be really interested in checking out that PR when you have it. Does anybody else have anything to add?
There was an issue I raised against Porter that discusses some of the aspects of this. 147. Won't bother repeating it here, but it's worth checking that maybe.
Yeah, so Porter was going to try to address this just for Porter, and it would have been specific to saying I need an exact bundle. This would be a much more general purpose solution where you could say, I need a class of bundle. I need a bundle that could give me something that wasn't just exactly like the Azure MySQL bundle or something like that. So this would be way preferable to what we were hoping to do with Porter. I don't know, Jeremy, if you've been thinking about that more, that one issue.
I haven't, because I think my preference is probably to solve it more generically, like we're discussing right now.
Yeah, just a couple of general comments. This same problem has cropped up in the OSGI standard. Coincidentally, they use the same term bundle, but they have inter-bundle requirements, version ranges, optional dependencies, and that kind of stuff. So they've been around all that kind of stuff before. There is a bit of a catch. If you allow optional dependencies, you end up with an NP complete problem, and the code is quite hard to write to resolve the graph. But it can be done, has been done in the past, but just beware.
You said it's OSGI?
Yeah, it's a niche piece of Java software, but I can provide a link to some information about that.
That'd be really helpful.
Yeah, I'll drop it in the minutes.
Awesome. So excited to see that come along. And now we can hand it off to Jeremy. Jeremy, you want to give us an update on the outputs portion of the spec, your proposal, which has been out there for a while. Thank you for your patience on that, by the way.
Yeah, no worries. So there's a PR open right now that discusses adding outputs to the spec, kind of in line with what we had for parameters and credentials kind of mixed together, with the concept that I have a bundle and it might create some infrastructure, or might create anything and then needs to output that. An example might be it creates a Kubernetes cluster and you need to get the kubeconfig file out of that. So we've had a lot of discussion on it, and I think we kind of tied it into this dependencies conversation as well. One last kind of iteration on that I'm working on right now. I discussed with Michelle and Radu a little bit. We kind of discussed how you would take an output. Right now it specified we were going to allow like types of file. So you could say something like the kubeconfig file. How would you wire that then into like a parameter, because we don't have a file type for parameters. But I think with the alignment on JSON schema, it just kind of works, right? Like, so for a parameter, we can say that something is content encoded like base64. So we can do the same thing for outputs. And one of the comments was we should probably realign the PR to say that outputs can be specified with JSON schema as well. So that's what I'm working on right now. So I'll hopefully have that updated this afternoon, and then I'll solicit some more like final reviews of it, and hopefully we can merge that in.
Yeah, I'm just a little bit worried about the output because I guess most of the time it will be kind of sensitive information, like a kubeconfig file with TLS bundle embedded in it. So I guess we shouldn't persist that when we run the bundle, but I think it's a good fit with the dependency thing. Like we only use that for passing information between CNAB bundles and not persisting it. I'm not sure about that, but yeah, I'm really worried about what we do with this output, and do we store it? Do we? Yeah, I don't know. And actually, if I'd like to have a solution where actually the data doesn't get back to the host at all, and actually just pass through the shared temporary volume or something like that. I think that's something that we should try to achieve in the spec. Something, yeah.
The main question here is it a concern of the spec or of the specific implementation, how the outputs are passed? I think the spec should only be concerned in how to represent the outputs.
Yeah, but the spec should for now, the spec, for example, specifies that the result of a CNAB invocation should be persisted in some kind of claim, even if it doesn't say how it's persisted. It states that the runtime should persist something in some way. And I think for output parameters, it shouldn't. It should either print directly in the console if it's outside of dependency graph, or just pass data through CNAB invocations, but not but not persisting it in any way.
Jeremy, in your proposal, there is a way to specify that a specific output is sensitive information, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then for that, had you thought about the implementation already, or just kind of like letting the runtimes figure out?
I think it makes the most sense for the runtimes to figure out how they're going to handle those things, just because it's going to be different depending on the implementation. For duffle, we may persist things, we may not persist things. And I think it really just comes down to what your runtime expects to do with those outputs and how your runtime is running. Like if it runs local, or if it runs, we've been discussing like the thing that runs inside of a cluster. How does it handle persisting those things? So I think it really just comes down to how the runtime will handle them in this. Go, Radu.
So does this spec has a note on by default the information is stored in the claim, or how is it stored by default? If no information is sensitive data, how is it persisted?
For the outputs?
Yeah.
The spec doesn't say anything about how they're persisted. It just says how the invocation image should report it back to the runtime.
Okay, and that's through the claim?
No, that's through a known path inside of the invocation image. The claims are persisted, and just like we don't store credentials in the claims, I don't think we should store outputs in the claims for that reason.
Okay, awesome.
So Simon, would it make sense to have, so is the spec in its current state about outputs in a good enough state so that we can have a chat about how to actually persist or not persist things in duffle or in other runtime? So I'm thinking right now about the Kubernetes driver, for example, and how I would store those in secrets. Is it in a good enough state to have a chat about that? Or do you think you'd need changes in the spec itself? So
I have to read a little bit more about that, but I guess the idea is to use temp volumes to avoid storing that on disk. And if it's the case, I'm totally okay with that, and I think it's the best way to handle that. And I agree, a temporary volume I think it can be shared between 2 or more containers. So it might be an easy way to pass data back and through different CNAB invocations.
Yeah, that makes sense. We really should create an issue to track this. I think it makes the most sense to create an issue in duffle, since we're talking about implementation here. Simone, do you want to maybe take that up and throw an issue in duffle so we can track it?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions or thoughts or want to talk about outputs? Some questions for Jeremy? Okay, awesome. Next thing is status of the image relocation PR plus draft documentation PR. Glenn, did you have that, or Radu, did you want to talk about that, one of y'all?
Yeah, I added it. I think Glenn can give us an update on that.
Yeah, the PR's complete essentially has been reviewed by a couple of people. It's currently based on the Go container registry code, but the assumption is that in due course that implementation may be replaced. Seems like there are a couple of options for the future, but that's not so interesting so long as the function's preserved. And the draft docs are really just an introduction to what image relocation is, and then a scenario, a kind of artificial scenario that tries to make it a bit more realistic.
That's awesome.
The point of raising it here was, I think Radu raised it to see if anyone else wanted to weigh in on the PR before we merge it.
Yeah, so that PR has been going on for quite a while, so thanks a lot for your patience, Glenn, on that. So I think this would be more or less the last chance for people to weigh in on that. It's been reviewed for more than 2 weeks now, so if you have any thoughts, now would be the best time. I really like to have that merge so that we can iterate on the implementation.
Awesome. Thoughts or forever hold your peace? Okay. Okay, cool. Status of the push-pull PR. Reddy, do you want to take that away?
Yeah, sure. So over the past couple of weeks, we created a CNAB Go repo that contains an initial bundle client for CNAB, and Sylvan created a pull request to actually use that in Duffle. So right now, Duffle in master uses the CNAB Go library. And then the push-pull PR also uses that, and it's also used in CNAB to OCI. So we have a common library right now that we use across multiple projects. Specifically, the push-pull PR has been I've been rebasing it for the last couple of days, and I hope that by the end of the week we'll have something that's it's no longer a draft PR, but something that we can actually use.
Awesome. Yeah, let me know whenever you need a review on that. There's a lot of old code for like when we had first done a POC of how to push-pull store bundles and registries, and I don't know if that code is still there, but it is dead code now. We left in there and we hid the Cobra commands in Duffle because we were maybe going to potentially reuse some of that code. Does your pull request remove that dead code, or are we going to need to do something separate to do that cleanup?
No, I'm most likely going to remove most of the previous code from there and just have a clean implementation. Mainly because we changed quite a bit the way that we store bundles on disk, so I'm just going to remove it.
Okay, awesome. I didn't see the bundle like using CNAB Go. CNAB Go's bundle package in Duffle, like that PR, but if you'll point me to it, if you need a review, let me know. I'm good with that. I think I was the one who was holding off on wanting to switch until we got things more stable.
Yeah, and I think we already have that in master right now.
Oh, okay. Sounds good. All right. Okay. Anybody else have anything on push-pull? Okay, cool. Wow. We're speeding along this meeting. Okay, so this meeting, I had proposed that we have this meeting every other week instead of every week. And I was initially really nervous because I was like, oh man, I don't want to be that jerk. It's like, I don't want to see y'all as often. But I did this poll and in Slack, and it seems like everybody who voted wants to change this meeting to have it every other week instead of every week. Which is great because we're having a lot of conversation in the Slack channel anyway, so I don't see any issues there. But I checked on that poll this morning, and it seems like the results are still the same. So next week we can skip having this meeting, and we can start having this meeting every other week. So no meeting next week. We'll have the next meeting the week after that, and it'll still be an hour. Does anybody have anything to share around meeting schedule? Is everybody okay with that? Any objections here? Go ahead, Jeremy. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. Next week that meeting, the first will be the week of DockerCon. Is that right?
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true.
So I will be out probably because I'll be at DockerCon, and I think some others will too.
Okay. So we should think about whether we want to have we could have the meeting next week and then skip the week after, or we could skip both weeks. we can just have more conversation around that in Slack. Okay, cool. And Butcher's out for the week, so I would want to ask him too.
Just another question. Is it possible to have some sort of calendar entry that we can add? Because otherwise we'll have to guess when the 2-weekly period is coming up.
We need to have a canonical calendar to like point to. I'll take that as an action item.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay. Wow, we have so much time left. Does anybody else have anything they want to discuss? Yeah, what's up? Radu, did you say something?
The only thing that I wanted to bring up is the the CNAB spec added a change in the JSON in the parameter validation to add a JSON schema, and we've had a PR in Duffle that did that, and I've rebased it for like 6 times now already, and I'm just gonna link it right now and leave it open for a final round of feedback for that as well. If anyone has any. Want to have Duffle in sync with the spec as much as possible in the next couple of weeks. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is that I think we'd like to have a Duffle release either late this week or early next week, depending on how fast we can get things in. So if you have anything required that you'd like to have in Duffle for the next release, and you want to bring that up, that would be great.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. That sounds good. And Simone, I think you're the one who brought up maybe separating the distribution side of things in the CNAB spec from the runtime. Do you want to chat about that at all? Or do you want to?
Yes, actually, it's related to the conversations that we had with digest and things like that, and the fact that the more I think about the state of the spec, the more I think about it about a runtime spec. If you look at how OCI does specify a runtime spec for how an OCI container should be stored locally and should be executed by a runtime, versus the distribution spec, which is how it is distributed in OCI in artifact. I think we should try to do the same. And the more I think about it, the more I think there are things inside the CNAB spec today that are related to distribution, mostly things like content digest and things like that. And yeah, and I know that there is still this fig bundle thing, and I try to push to remove that as well, because in my mind, the best way that we can handle fig bundle is through relocation into a registry inside an airgapped cluster or something like that. And this relocation would be much easier to do if we just worked with OCI exports and things like that. And so I'd like to move the fig bundle concerns to be more a distribution concern than runtime concern, and to in order actually to simplify the spec quite a lot.
Yes, Radu.
I think the main question here is whether we want to have that in the next month or so, or wait until after. So I think the schedule we've discussed in the past was until the time frame of June, early June. We want to have something stable and then work on breaking changes. Is that something that we want to have in that time frame of breaking changes, or do we want to have that before?
Actually, the thing is that I'd like to have that before 1.0, because once we have 1.0, it will be really difficult to deprecate fields and things like that. If we think that fig bundles should be more something about distribution than something that the runtime should care about. And so actually, there is less risk, in my opinion, there is less risk to remove everything about thick bundle, content digest, and launch a V1 with that, and maybe in V1.1 just bring back some aspects of it, because we proved that it's not a pure distribution context anymore. But it feels, for me, it feels safer to have a smaller spec for V1 and add fields back if we really need them in an upcoming version, than having to deprecate things that we introduced by not really thinking things completely through.
I'm not sure the parallel with OCI really works that well, though, because the executing a container and having the distribution spec talking about how images are referenced is quite a clean split. But we have bundles which refer to images, so we instantly get into the distribution side of things because of those image references.
Yeah, that's a fair point, and I have no good answer to that. Yeah.
And I think the runtime will need to deal with thick bundles. For instance, doing relocation of thick bundles is a runtime concern. But yeah, we could factor some of the spec differently so that some of the considerations are in a distribution subspec. But I'm not sure it really make things simpler.
Yeah, my point is just about content. Should we do content validation at the runtime in the runtime format, or should we try to handle thick bundle by just having deep OCI exports and make things much simpler for us? Because anyway, the problem is that what we have for component images, if we look at this in a generic way where we support VMs and things like that, it's more something like opaque strings than OCI reference anyway, because depending on the type of images, it might not be stored in the same way. And I always felt a bit weird about that, because as it's some kind of opaque strings, how could we handle content validation anyway? I'm not sure. I'm a bit confused about this aspect of the spec.
Chris, you unmuted. Did you want to say anything?
Excuse me. So I've been a lot of the discussions that we had, I think probably the emergent thing that's kind of changed where things originally started was this whole idea of relocation/rewrite as a runtime requirement. I think initially we're all trying to find the home for that. Because we have that in play, I think that vastly simplifies the whole thick versus thin bundle to the point where, do we really even need that defined in the spec? And is that going to, and I think part of that is between that, and I think we're already kind of moving the direction of prototyping the registry side. Does that hold us back from landing on that stable 1.0 in June? I think is kind of the core question, and the value of breaking it into different spec or even sections of the spec, because I don't want things like relocation. I think is going to be a hard concept. It's going to take a while for us to kind of work through it and really land on it for the other things. So I don't want that to hold us back, if that makes sense. And I think that's kind of what I read into Simon's description. I think the only concern both me and Glenn kind of highlighted was we want the runtime to be able to validate, that these are the bits that I told that they were. So even if that's just exposing that digest, that may be the extent of satisfying that need. But I think it's just a matter of how much can we kind of pare down to land on that stable 1.0 where it's useful enough because I kind of look at all the in toto security, supply chain stuff where honestly that's not absolutely required to run, but it's a value add after we have something that's solid that works, and then we've kind of built enlightened to the fact that we want to be able to put this in, and we have all the requisite pieces. So I think that's what I kind of look at is driving towards this 1.0. How can we simplify and drive faster, or is it not something that's slowing us down?
Does anyone else want to chime in? Okay. I think let's discuss this a little bit more in Slack. Seems like a few of us are on the same page and we may want further discussion here. So let's just continue this conversation a little bit more on Slack and in the issue queue. Welcome, Ryan. We missed you earlier, but we got your dependencies issue in on the agenda and we chatted about that a little bit.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything they want to discuss here today or bring up here today? All right. Great. Thank you so much and see y'all next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.